We are going over roasting today. And I'm actually going to start going over the recipes quickly because we need to get everything in the oven because it's all going to take time to cook, and then we can talk about it a little bit later. So, all right. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to start with the chicken because that takes the longest. So I do have the recipes here in front of me just in case I forget. Oh, and I forgot one tool, one moment. All right, okay, so a whisk to whisk up the sauces, seasonings. Okay, so for the chicken, I already have the oven preheated to 425 degrees. Some of the recipes are 425, some are 400. We're just gonna put everything in the oven at 425. So the first thing we're gonna do, I'm gonna take a large bowl, and I like using a large bowl so I can just mix the seasoning together, put the chicken in it so it's big enough for the chicken, and toss the chicken in that bowl. So I want it to be large enough to be able to put the chicken in it. Okay, and we're going to put 2 tablespoons of the olive oil, which is half of the amount that we're starting with. So I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it. It's all gonna go in later anyway. We have the lemon juice. So the recipe has 2 lemons. 1 lemon I zested first and then cut it in half and juiced it. And then the second lemon I sliced. We have the lemon zest. Harissa seasoning, which I will talk about later as well. Honey. And I'm just going to scrape that out with this whisk because I'm going to use it to mix it all together. Okay, so once that's all mixed, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab the chicken. And I'm just going to put it into the bowl. And I'm going to toss it around. Okay, so we want to make sure that the chicken gets covered all over. And if you have the time, you can do this and then let it sit for about like 15 minutes just for it to absorb the flavor a little more before you actually put it in the pan. And I am going to, all right. So I'm gonna place the chicken in here. Okay, and then we are going to pour the rest of this seasoning. We want all the seasoning. Now, I'm actually going to keep this bowl because we're going to season the vegetables a little bit, and we don't need to get 2 dishes dirty. So, for the veggies, I'm going to put sweet potatoes. So I have the 2 sweet potatoes, the onions, the chickpeas, and then the rest of the olive oil. Okay, and again, we're going to toss that. We want to get the olive oil to coat the vegetables completely. Okay, and then we're going to pour that over the chicken. And now what I'm doing, and I'm going to try and bring it over here so you can see, I'm basically just making it one even layer. Okay, it doesn't matter like how high or not it is, but I want it to be all one even layer so it'll cook evenly. Okay, so once we have that, we're going to put that in the oven. and again, the oven is set at 425 degrees. Very hot. Now, since I'm going to be using all 3 racks, because I'm basically going to be cooking everything together, I'm going to move one of the racks up. Actually, I'm going to leave it. I don't want it to be too high up. We'll fit everything in. So the chicken is going to go in. All right, and we are going to set a timer. We want it for, oh, wait. Oh, I wanted the lemon too. All right, we're gonna put the lemon on top. Let's bring it out. All right, so I'm just gonna arrange the lemon slices on top. All right, that's it. Okay. Next one is going to be the root vegetables. So for the root vegetables, I chose here 3 vegetables. But you can play around with it. It doesn't have to be the same ones. I chose sweet potatoes, carrots, and beets. You can choose turnips. You can play around with it. Just it needs to be about the same amount, but it doesn't matter which root vegetables you use. So for this, what we're going to do, again, I'm going to put it all into a large bowl. In a large bowl or a baking sheet. Oh. All right. You can either do it into a large bowl and toss it and then transfer it into the baking sheet, or you can do it in the baking sheet, drizzle, and then we're going to toss it in there. So we're going to do it into our baking pan. Okay, and we are going to, I already cut everything. So you see it's pretty even chunks so that it cooks evenly. And we are going to put, okay, the root vegetables. We have the beets. We have our sweet potatoes and the carrots. Okay, and then I'm going to add the onions, the red onions. I cut it in the same way pretty much. And then we are going to drizzle the olive oil on top. Okay, so we're just going to pour it all over. The next is the salt and pepper. Okay, and the rosemary is the last ingredient that we haven't put in yet, and we're going to wait with this because we don't want it to cook with the vegetables the whole time. It'll burn. So I'm just going to set that aside. And I'm going to lightly toss these, and again, if you don't mind your hands getting dirty, you can go ahead and use your hand, or you can use a spatula, tongs to like twist them around. You basically just want to make sure that all the vegetables are covered with oil and the seasoning. We are going to pull it out halfway through and toss it again before, and then add the rosemary before it's done cooking. So we will be tossing it around a little bit. All right, so now that it's all evenly mixed, okay, this is ready to go in the oven. This is like speed cooking. butternut squash. All right, so here we are going to use a bowl because we want to combine the olive oil and the maple syrup. I'm actually going to just combine it all already in that bowl, and I'm going to use a large bowl instead of what it says in the recipe to just combine the olive oil and the maple syrup in a small bowl. We'll just do it together here. So it's maple syrup and olive oil, and it's even amounts. And then we are going to add the squash and the garlic. And I'm going to toss that together. And I'll go get another spatula. All right, and we're just going to toss this together. This is a lot of garlic. Yes, it says 1 head of garlic. It's the whole head of garlic. Okay, we're going to toss this together. And I'm actually going to be making this one. I'm going to make it in one of these dishes. We're going to use this for the squash and then also for the dessert. That way I'm going to have room for everything together in the oven. Okay, so now that I have it all mixed together, I'm going to place this into the pan. And now I'm going to put salt and pepper. Okay, and the pepper. And then we are going to put this in the oven, and we're going to start with 20 minutes. And then after 20 minutes, we're going to add the pine nuts and the sage. All right, so this is going in the oven, third dish. All right, we do need to move them around a little bit. Okay, and we are going on to our dessert. Gonna keep this aside for those ingredients. All right, so our dessert. So we're gonna use plums. Now I actually wanted to show you how we're doing this. So I already prepped most of the plums, but I left one. Okay, so I'm gonna try and see if you can see it from the top as well. You're gonna take the knife and we are going to go, the plums usually have like a bit of a crease. So it'll always have like a crease on one end. You're gonna go with that crease. So you're gonna put the knife in and then you're gonna twist it around the pit. Okay, until you go all the way around. That's it for the knife. Then you're going to hold it with 2 hands and twist it in different directions, each hand clockwise to loosen it from the pit. So then you have one half that doesn't have the pit. And then for the other half, you're gonna use a spoon and just gently kind of dig underneath the pit And I'm going to place the thyme. So I'm just going to grab the tips of the thyme and set them aside, just because we want a little bit of time to decorate. Okay, and then I'm going to place the thyme on the bottom of the pan. And on top of that, we're going to place the plums. So it's really just covering the whole area. Okay, now once we have the plums all sitting in the dish, we're going to sprinkle the brown sugar on top of the plums. And you want to just make sure that all the plums get some of this sugar. Okay, so once we have all the sugar, we're going to take the water, and I'm using this measuring cup that has the lip because I want to pour between the plums. I don't want it to pour on top of the plums. So it helps me aim a little better. And you can just choose one spot and pour it there. It's going to evenly coat the bottom of the pan. All right, so this is ready. I'm actually going to set my timer. So we have another 15 minutes until we need to toss the vegetables and add the pine nuts and the sage to them. Okay, and I'm gonna put the plums in the oven already, and we'll check them after those 15 minutes. Okay, so now that we have finished speed cooking our menu and placing everything in the oven, a little bit about roasting. So roasting is basically cooking something in a very high heat, dry high heat. So it's usually over 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and the idea is that it uses dry heat, so it doesn't use steam or anything like that. It doesn't have to be done in the oven. You can roast on a grill if you cover the items. It's really just cooking it in a high temperature. The harissa seasoning. So this is the harissa seasoning that I used. You can make it yourself. So if you look online, it has different kinds of peppers. So it's a little spicy. It has ancho, chipotle, and then it has paprika, cumin, coriander, salt, garlic, and caraway. Harissa usually comes as a paste, and it's used very often in Israel. But you can also get it as a spice, and then you can just spice your foods with this. The spice way is she sells on Amazon actually, and she used to live in Israel. She lives near San Diego, so she has a lot of Israeli and Middle Eastern different seasoning combinations. And that is most of it. Does anyone have any questions? And then if you need anything, you can either unmute yourself or write in the chat and Eliza will ask me.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
For the butternut squash, did you cut that yourself or did you buy the pre-cut?
No, I cut it. So you know what? Let me show you. All right, since we have time, we'll cut and do whatever we can. So, whole butternut squash, what I did, so you're gonna cut it. It has two parts. It has the long part, and then it has the bulb part. The bulb part has the seeds inside. I'm actually gonna rinse this a little because it's very good. You want to find that area between the top part and the bulb, and you're going to use a big chef knife and you're going to cut it right there. And then you're also going to cut the tip off and the little butt. Okay, so once you have those parts cut off, you have two options. You can either use a peeler and peel off the sides, or you can take the knife, because if you look at the squash, and let's try and see if you can see it from here. So you see how the inside is a darker orange and then it has like a lighter yellow? You want to cut through that. You want to get to the darker orange. So I'm going to use my knife and I'm just going to go strip by strip, and I'm going to cut it from one end to the other until I cut it all, peel it all off. And then I'm going to do the same for the bulb. Okay, we're going to do this one as well. And then for this one, it'll be a little wavy, so you kind of want to try and go with the curve of the squash so that you don't lose as much of the squash while you're peeling it. So I start in one direction and then I kind of correct myself and pull it outwards so that I'm not losing too much of the squash. Okay, and once I have that cut, I'm just going to go over the corners a little bit that I missed. Okay, so this part we're now going to cut in half. And then I'm going to use a spoon just to spoon out the whole inside. And then that way it's easier to cut it into pieces. And you can probably just get it, if you get underneath it, you can get the whole, most of the seeds all in one spoon. Any other questions? Maura, you have some more questions.
The chopped garlic, like if you didn't want to use chopped garlic, you could use like the jar that has like the.
Yeah, you can use the jarred garlic as well. I would use about, so this was about 5 tablespoons of garlic.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It was a lot. Yeah, because about the bottom rim, just underneath the rim of this is 4 tablespoons, and it was like heaping. So I would say about 5 tablespoons.
Wow. And for the roasted veggies that you did before, did I like not notice, or did you put salt and pepper on those?
On what?
The roasted
Did you
vegetables.
put salt and pepper on the roasted?
Yes, there was salt and pepper on the roasted vegetables. There's salt and pepper on everything, I think. Yeah, let's look at the recipe just to remember exactly. Yeah, so we put the vegetables and then we drizzled first the olive oil and then the salt and pepper, and then we tossed it all together. So it all got the salt and pepper mixed together.
Okay.
And I'm gonna remember to put the rosemary. So we have the rosemary that's gonna go into the vegetables, and then the sage and the pine nuts are gonna go with the butternut squash. Any other questions? questions? All right, so I'm going to cut this up. We're going to wait a couple of minutes before we can add the rest of the ingredients. All right, so I'm just going to spoon out this other half. Okay, and then for cutting, what I did, once you have this cut, you can either cut rings out of it, or you can cut strips. And each strip, because you're determining the thickness of the strip, each strip I'm then cutting again into two, and then slicing that and getting the cubes. Okay, and then for the bulk part, there's that top part of it, which is still going to be thick, and I'm cutting that the same as I would cut the rest of the squash. And then for the part that had all the seeds inside, I'm still going to cut the strips. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each one and I'm just going to cut it with the angle, turning it around. So I'm doing each one individually. Like this. And for the butternut squash, you do want to make sure that the knives, because it's a much thicker and harder vegetable, you do want to make sure that you have a sharper knife and not a dull knife. It will hurt you very much if you try using a dull knife. It'll just be very hard to cut through it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead. The timer just has a few more minutes, and I'm going to pull out the vegetables, and we're going to add the rosemary to it and toss it again, and then we're going to do the butternut squash. Okay, so we're going to add the rosemary. And now the liquid from this, because I chose the beets, so the liquid is getting this reddish color, so it's going to color all of the sweet potatoes and the carrots, and it'll kind of tint those as well. Okay, we're going to put that back in the oven. Okay, and so now we have the butternut squash. Okay, and we're gonna add the pine nuts and the sage. And I am gonna go ahead and toss this a little bit, just so it all gets mixed together. And I will just rinse this. Oh, actually, I'm gonna toss it with this.
Put a spatula in it.
All right, so I'm just making sure that the pine nuts gets mixed in, and the sage isn't just sitting up on top. All right, we're gonna put this back in the oven. And then the dessert should be ready in just a few minutes. Dessert's gonna be ready first today. Okay, does anyone else have any more questions?
I have this, I don't know if you can see me, I have this acorn squash. How do you, like, what's the best
Acorn
way to,
squash?
yeah.
Okay, so what you want to do for acorn squash, you want to cut it in half, but you don't want to cut it in half. Oh, that's my timer. You don't want to cut it in half in the middle of it. You want to cut it from top to bottom. So
Like
you want to
this?
cut, yeah, exactly. So you want it to be like a boat, and for both halves to be equal, not to have a top and a bottom. Once you have that cut in half, again, it's going to have the seeds. So you're going to clean it out from the seeds. And then you can either do sweet or savory. If you're going for sweet, I would put a little bit of butter, just a couple pieces of butter, brown sugar, and then you can add maybe a little bit of honey if you want, or it's just fine even with the butter and brown sugar. And if you want it savory, drizzle olive oil, salt, and pepper. That's it. And then you roast it in the oven. It'll take it about 30, 40 minutes probably for it to be until it's tender. So you just want to check the meat of the squash and make sure that it's soft.
At what temperature?
I would do it at 400 degrees. And then actually, you can eat it like that. Or last year for the Rosh Hashanah class, what we did was once they were made, I had a quinoa mixture that we made. Like it was kind of like a quinoa salad. It had some pomegranate seeds and other things mixed into it. Onion, it had caramelized onions and craisins. And then that you put inside the squash and you serve it like that. So if you want something that is vegan or something that you want more veggies, you can just use that as a main dish. You don't really need anything else. You can add some feta cheese or something like that if you're not going to have meat, if you don't keep kosher. And that is great to eat together with it. Eating it, I personally wouldn't eat the skin. I do know that there are people that would eat the skin, so you can just clean it well and then you can eat it as well. Any other questions? All right, I'm gonna pull out the plums. We're gonna see if they're soft enough, if they're ready yet. All right, let's pull it out. All right, so to check if the plums are ready, I'm going to use a knife. So I'm just gonna check if it's tender. And actually you can either use a knife, which obviously it's sharp, so it will go in. The question isn't if it can go in or not, but if there's any tension back, and here they're still pretty firm. When you're checking if things are done, you can also use a fork, and that way you really know if it's soft or not, because if it's soft, the fork will go in. It doesn't have that sharp edge at the tip that will go in no matter what. So I'm just gonna let this, actually we need it to cook a little longer before it'll be ready. It needs a few more minutes. Okay, any other questions while we're waiting for everything to cook in the oven? If for whatever reason it's not ready by the time you guys need to leave, you can feel free to leave. I will email you, I can email you pictures of all the dishes once they're finished. It'll probably take about another 15 minutes for everything to be done. So if there's any other questions. Jerry, you had a question. You're muted.
Unmute yourself, Jerry.
Here, wait, I can.
I was wondering if I wanted to make this without chicken, if there was some vegetarian thing that I could use to replace the chicken.
Yeah, so you can definitely, I mean, you can use tofu if you wanted to add that to it, but it's not going to cook the same as the root vegetables and any vegetables that you want to roast. So in that situation, I would cook the vegetables with the seasoning, and then I would cook the tofu separately. You could use some of the dried harissa seasoning to season the tofu before you cook it, and then I would mix it together. But I would cook them separately and then put them together.
Is there anything you would recommend beside tofu?
I mean, truthfully, you know, this does have, you have the garbanzo beans, and you have the vegetables. So if you want to add some cheese and some olives maybe that are Mediterranean flavors, like you can add feta cheese, that will go with the flavors, and you're still getting protein. So you can do that, and then you can do the quinoa if you want to have like something a little more filling, or rice or anything like that. So you could do that instead of adding something to replace the chicken. Just do it without the chicken, and you could add the feta or olives, something like that, and then just have it over quinoa or together with quinoa.
Great idea.